Boy, AI is moving fast, isn't it? And some of these capabilities that we can now achieve effortlessly using some of these AI tools are pretty unbelievable, including being able to convert a video to speak a language that I can't even speak. And that's what we're going to cover in this video, is showing one workflow that you can follow to automatically dub your video content into another language that you don't even speak to expand your audience. So you don't really need a ton of coding experience for this, but we'll walk you through step by step how to get this workflow set up. So let's get going. I have this video where I told a pretty amazing joke, and I'm just going to play it here. I used to hate facial hair, but then it grew on me. Oh, if you're not groaning, I guess I don't blame you. But we have this dad joke video, and I want to make sure that folks across the world can watch the content that I'm producing. So to start, I have a Mux account, and I'm going to set up this Mux account and get the values that I need to approach this workflow, to tackle this workflow. I also want to introduce ElevenLabs, which is the audio platform that we're going to be using to create the dubbing audio files based off of the input that we'll be giving it. And then N8N, which is a really neat way to set up workflows that can be complicated if you were to write the code, but here we're just building nodes and kind of visually assembling what this workflow can look like. So let's walk through this solution for how we're able to use these three tools in tandem to solve this problem that we're faced with. I have an environment that I work in often called Delete Me, and I can create a new asset within this environment. But before I do that, if I were to upload a video here, I would get a lot of features right natively within Mux. I would get automatically generated animated GIFs and captions and thumbnails, but Mux does not do any dubbing right out of the box. What Mux does do is allow you to hook up your other AI tools and APIs to introduce additional workflows where you need those extra features. So what we need to do is then basically have a connection or a notification to come from Mux and be sent over to our automation that we're going to build within N8N to say, hey, Mux says we have a new video. Here's the information about that video. Do whatever you want with it. And within that workflow, that's where we're going to introduce that new feature set. So in order to do that, I'm over in N8M, and you can set these little triggers. And with this original trigger that we have here is kind of a handler, which creates a URL endpoint. So this particular endpoint can be used as the notification receiver from Mux. So just by setting these different values here, I'm saying I'm expecting a post request to come to this webhook receiver. Here's the path that this is just an automatically generated UUID and to respond immediately. Essentially, this is going to collect the information about the video that we've uploaded when Mux sends this notification out. So by creating this node within N8N, I get this URL. And I can use that URL over in Mux under the settings, webhooks section. And I want to make sure I'm in the exact same environment that we're working within. Look, I've already added it here. We can add this URL to notify, and it matches the exact value that came out of N8N. All the events that are happening within Mux will be automatically sent to this webhook handler that can now be acted upon within the N8N workflow environment. So that's cool. So now we can take the next step. So we can add these nodes within N8N, and I'm using this sort of this conditional node within N8N. It's an if node, and it is basically going to check, is the static rendition ready of this video? Now Mux has this whole concept of what a static rendition is, but it's essentially creating multiple files based off of your input file to ensure that you can have the flexibility to work with it as you need. Anytime a new static rendition is created, it will send a notification through that webhook system to the receiver to say, hey, static rendition that you've requested to create is now available, so you can act on it if you need it in some way. So that's what we're checking here, is that, hey, does this payload, this webhook notification, is it equal to the value of video.asset.static rendition dot ready. So this is the literal value, this string value. The different payloads that are coming in will have different types, and we can kind of take a look at what that can look like here. So this is an example webhook that was sent using video.asset static rendition ready as the type, and we get additional information about the static rendition within that webhook here. So we will act on it. So what's essentially happening here is if it is not that type, then we don't want to do anything. We added this node here that is a no-op. That would mean that we received a webhook that was not the type that we cared about. So we only want to act on if the static rendition is ready. Now, if it is ready, then we need to take the next step here. And we're going to make an API call to Mux's API. We're going to use information from the webhook to then request additional information from Mux related to that asset here. And that particular information that we're looking for is called a playback ID. So I'm making this API call, and then I'm using this variable syntax to say, hey, whatever the data.asset ID from the webhook body that came in was, that's what we want additional information about. So it's going to trigger off this GET request. This is a HTTP request node within N8N. And as soon as it hits this point, it's going to make that GET request and then pass it on to the next node that we've set up here. And that next node that we've set up is the submit dubbing job node. Again, just another HTTP request. It's kind of handling these in a waterfall approach, cascading one at a time. So once we get additional information about that asset, now we want to make another API call. But this time, the API call is not going to Mux. It's going over to a third-party tool called ElevenLabs. And ElevenLabs has a really neat product. They are able to introduce music creation and dubbing here all within the dashboard, but you can also access that programmatically through their API. And that's what we're going to do here. So within ElevenLabs, you will need to make an API key, and you can do that under developers. I think it's API keys here. You can generate a new API key, and you'll want to use that within your N8N instance so that it can authenticate with the ElevenLabs API. You can kind of see how I've set that up here using the header auth type and selecting the value. Now, this was configured before recording this video within the credentials area of N8N. And this is true for the Mux API as well. You can create new API keys within Mux under settings and access tokens. We have the ability to generate new access tokens that will allow you to work within the environment that you're working with over at Mux. You can give your access token a name, and it will give you the values that you need to plug into a workflow like this. I'll go back to the request here. See, we're getting a basic auth request type and using the Mux API credentials that we've set up. So these are the different ways that you'll need to authenticate with the APIs before you can actually interact with them. So here we are making a post request to the ElevenLabs API. They have a dubbing endpoint, and you can see that documented right here. It's all relatively straightforward the way that it's set up here. But if we take a closer look just at our request type, we could see we're sending a form data body type here. We are specifying the source URL so that it's specifically locating the audio only of the video that I've uploaded. And that was specified when I created the static rendition when it's uploaded. I'll show you that here in a little bit. But we have a specific URL that says stream.mux.com plus look at the previous JSON data from the playback ID request that we made over to Mux through the API, grab that playback ID and put it here in this area. So this is a variable. And then also concatenate this string here at the end. So it says plus / audio.m4a. So this is a way that we are going to pass that audio off to ElevenLabs for dubbing. Now there's additional information here. We have a target language, and I've selected Finnish as the target language, something maybe someday I'll speak, but I speak zero Finnish right now. The source language can be automatically determined. And then they have a couple of different values here that are also just specified. The mode is automatic, number of speakers. If you go through the documentation, you should be able to see the description for some of these, set to 0 to automatically detect the number of speakers, which is what I've done here. Give the job a name. So I've just called it the dub for, and then use the Mux playback ID as the name for this dubbing job. Do we want to watermark it? Nope. So I put false, and that's it. So again, we're going to take the playback ID information and use it to construct the URL for the audio file that we want to be dubbed. And as soon as that's sent off, we can now enter into this job status checking loop here that will occasionally just check in on the job status and determine whether or not the job is done, ready to go. Or if it's not, then we wait a little bit and we go back around and check the job status again. So I'll double click in here. We can see that this is just, again, an HTTP request node. There is a GET method request. Here's the API endpoint. We're using the dubbing ID job that was returned from the previous step. Again, we are using the authentication types, and it's just a GET request to this endpoint. Now, if we were to look here, we can see the GET request here. It's matching the same URL format. So again, we're checking, is it ready? Is it done? Here's another if node right here. Check the status field from what has been returned. If it's equal to dubbed, then yes, the job has finished. It's all set. If it's not equal to that value, then we go over to create this wait node, which says wait 10 seconds, and then go back here and enter this job status node once again. So we'll exit out, go back and check the job status until it's finally dubbed. If it's dubbed, then we can mark it as true, and it would go off to this final node over here to create the new audio track over on the Mux asset. Now there's probably another exit path that should be defined here that I haven't done for this prototype. We don't want it to loop forever here to say, hey, it's not equal to dubbed. Let's wait and check again when maybe the job failed for some reason. And there's no amount of checking is going to give a successful response. So we're checking if it's done. If it is done, then we'll create the audio track. Again, it's an HTTP request node with an N8N. And here's the endpoint here. We're using now the API for Mux. We're selecting the asset that was available from the get playback ID step, which was created earlier in the workflow. Here's how we were able to find that asset ID within the JSON. And we're making this post request to the tracks endpoint. Now this will create a new audio track on your Mux asset. We have a URL, we have a language code, and we have some pass-through, which is just metadata about the way that this was created. So the URL is going to be another N8N endpoint, and we'll see where this is coming from momentarily. But just take a look that it's a webhook, and we're making a dubbing request. And in that dubbing request here, we're using the dubbing ID and target language from the check job status step that we were using before. So it is going to grab the dubbing ID and the target language and inject that into this URL as a variable. So it's going to give us the job for the ElevenLabs dubbing job and the target language that was specified here. That is just going to appear in the final URL when the request is made. And then again, down here, the language code is the same value that was specified in that check job status execution. So we'll be able to just inject it straight from the response that was coming right from ElevenLabs. So what happens here? When we make this post request over to Mux, it's going to say, hey, add a new audio track to this asset and use this file that is returned from this URL as the new audio track, right? Now, where is this URL actually going? Because Mux is going to check this URL for the audio file and use it as the input. That's where I've set up this second little mini workflow down here, which is serve the audio file. So this is another webhook trigger here that is using these two variables, the dubbing ID and the language code. It's going to capture those values in the request that's made to this endpoint and will continue down the path of this little workflow that was set up. So anytime a request is made from Mux in this format, it will capture the values that were specified here and make it so that we can use them in the following steps. So this is going to handle the request. From here, we're going to fetch the audio data. It's an HTTP request that's handed off right to ElevenLabs using their fantastic API. It's a request to the dubbing endpoint using the dubbing ID from the params, the variables that were set up in that URL, audio, and the language code. So if we were to go here, we can see the audio, get dubbed audio. Here's the endpoint for it. So we have the format up here. We're using the dubbing ID and the language code. And what is returned is the file stream. That file is basically going to be proxied right through our handler here and responded to in that request. So this request, again, is coming from Mux, where it's saying, hey, give me the audio file that you want to use as that second language track. I'm proxying that request off to ElevenLabs to say, hey, do you got that audio file from that dubbing job that we just ran? Here's the information about the dubbing job and the language that I'm looking for. And the final step here is a response to their webhook using a binary file type, and the response data sources choose automatically from input. You don't have to do anything special here. It will just hand it off from the response in the previous step and respond to the webhook with the appropriate file. So this is the whole workflow. I'm going to try to publish this so that it can be used and imported into your N8N instance without really any additional configuration other than the authentication aspect. But we should take a look at this whole thing in action and how this works when I upload a video file to Mux. Okay, so I'm going to go to Assets. I'm going to go to the correct environment. And I want to create the new asset here. I'm going to select the file, dadjoke.mp4. Okay, we call it dadjoke. I'm going to click Next. We have settings in place, but I want to make sure that under this Advanced tab, again, this is where I'm going to create the static renditions. So here in the Mux docs, it shows us how we can add static renditions, which will make the file available for retrieval, the audio file. So I'm going to delete the highest resolution. I only need an audio only resolution available statically. So by adjusting this little payload here and introducing this static rendition, I'm going to kick off this upload. It will make that audio file available for N8N, and then it will send a notification over to N8N when the audio file is ready so we can kick off this entire workflow, which we'll watch in real time. So I'll go ahead and hit start upload. We're uploading the file. We can see it's ready to go here. It's ready pretty fast.
I used to hate facial.
But what we don't have is the additional language tracks just yet. And it's in progress. We can see the static rendition was created. And as soon as the static rendition is ready, then it will send that webhook over to our N8N workflow and kick off this whole dubbing process. So we'll keep an eye on both areas for when the static rendition is ready, and we should start to see this job and this workflow kick off. There we go. Now we can start to see these events are starting to come in. Some of these are likely just webhooks that are indications that the video is ready, but it wasn't related to the static rendition. Now this one looks like maybe it was the static rendition, because it's taking longer than some of these other ones that were probably discarded right at this step. And we can kind of click through here and see the path that it took. So it said the static rendition was not ready, so don't do anything here. Up here, this was the long job in place that we can kind of watch the path that it took. As you see the green path here, we got the playback ID, we submitted the job, we started a loop here, and when it was done, it created the audio track and continued down this path of serving the whole workflow that we had described. Now it looks like this job has completed, so I'm gonna go back over to my dad joke video, just do a quick reload on this page and check it out. We have a new icon here in the corner for audio. So not only do you have the opportunity to listen to the English track for my dad joke, but we have the Finnish track as well.
Ennen vihasin kasvojen karvoitusta, mutta sitten se kasvoi minuun.
Pretty cool. And that actually kind of sounds like me too, which is pretty wild. Now, here's the one caveat with all of this. I don't know any Finnish. And so did it get the joke right? There's probably some context here, especially when it comes to humor or nuance when you're trying to communicate something that these AI models, you need to do some sort of QA. You need to make sure, to the extent that you are comfortable, you'll want to put a human in that process to ensure that your content is meeting the requirements for your application and for your business. But for my case here, this is pretty neat to be able to now suddenly apply my video to a brand new audience that I wouldn't have been able to access before. So there you have it. If you have any questions about how you might be able to use this or something similar in your application, please don't hesitate to reach out for us. I'll make sure that I have a fresh new dad joke for you as soon as you contact. Cheers. Have a good one.